not cursing.
We're going to do what? Say that again.
We're going to spend this entire podcast not cursing. Curse
You,
words. Curse words are the words that your mother would wash your mouth out with soap for.
well, my mother never washed my mouth out with need, should, must, or ought.
When you said those words, those are the curse words. Those are the beginning curse words. We do not use those words.
When you grip reality, you don't use those words?
Even if you decide not to grip reality, it does not matter whether you grip reality or don't grip reality. There are certain words that are forbidden words.
You know, my
Need,
reality, my reality is sleeping.
excuse my language, but need, should, ought, and must are words that are used frequently in our culture as the main verb of a sentence. You know what we need to do? What we should do is what I think we ought to be doing right now is wait, we must, and then fill in the sentence with an infinitive or some kind of finish
An
to that. The
infinitive.
problem is, yeah, need, should, ought, and
What's an
must.
infinitive? Who knows what an infinitive
Infinitive.
is anymore?
It's a
What?
verbal noun. It's taking an action, and turning it into the idea of that action. To spit like that. Spitting is a dynamic active verb. You spit, spittle. So it's a direct action verb to do something to something else. But when you talk about to spit, I learned to spit pumpkin seeds or watermelon seeds or whatever it happens to be. Um, Now you've treated the concept of spitting as a noun. So you can refer
you
to it as to
you
spit.
you really need to probably get into a
No,
dictionary a little bit more.
no. I I have no actual need to look something up in the dictionary. But basically because I've memorized the dictionary. I read the dictionary a lot because in essence when you get from A to Z, you've read every book that's possible in the entire universe. So
And how
it's
many
just
times have I
easier
heard
than
this?
reading them all.
And I've heard this how many times?
I don't know,
At,
twice, I think.
at least every time I talk to you, it's like I'm going to I read the dictionary. You know, you really need a life. Is that all that goes on in New York? You need one. You
It has
need a
nothing to do
life.
with New York. I do not need a life. See, that's a good example. You need a life. Now the question is, why does a person phrase their thinking into need, should, ought, and must? What is it that's behind need, should, ought, and must? And the associated words like gotta, have to, supposed to, that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a whole bunch of slang words that go into that. But what's behind, let's say the leader of an organization that is addressing the employees or the members of the organization, and we are talking about how we are going to move forward as an organization in the upcoming year. 2020 is a total waste. Let's go to 2021. And the next sentence out of the leader's mouth is, we need to get our
Boom.
act together.
There
We
you go.
need to increase our income. What we ought to be doing is working hard on sales and follow up. We must, and every single sentence is the main verb is need, should, ought, or must, or gotta, have to, supposed to, all that. And I consider those swear words. Those are curse words. They are filthy words. They mean your brain has gone to sleep in the world and you actually cannot bring into your imagination or conscious mind any real verb that will give you direction and boots on the ground. You won't get it. We got what we need to do, and now it's lost. It's a slap in the face. It is demand. There's some kind of a standard that somebody set, and you're failing. You're not living up to the standard. How do you feel right now? Oh, I'm so ashamed. Now,
That's
if you don't feel guilt and shame, what do you feel? Eh, yeah, we need to do it. But whatever. And so you end up with these demands, need, should, ought, and must, and everybody shrugs their shoulders and says, yeah, yeah, we ought to be doing that. Yeah, yeah, we really should. Doesn't mean anything at all.
right.
So you have a powerful moment and you've wasted it with curse words. The curse words not being S this or F that, or those aren't curse words. Those are just biological functions. Who cares about that? That's not filthy words. Filthy words are words that are supposed to mean something. They don't mean anything at all. Need, should, ought, and must. I need to wash my mouth out with some good coffee.
Well, it comes back to, we would say in our parlance, it comes back to empowerment, and it's about power. Because then what are we doing? We're saying to that person, you need this, which puts me in the place of determining what is it they need or don't need. And so now I'm in that place of telling you, this is what you need to do based on whose authority?
Well, and
Well,
that's a
my
second
authority.
person directive, right? That's a second, but also it's used in first person plural. Everything going on in the world now in terms of racial tension and the matters that are at very high stakes. I read all the time. I've talked to friends, people who I know personally, sat down with a cup of coffee, and what they say are sentences like, what we need to do in America is, they don't mean themselves personally. They're
Right,
meaning the entire culture,
right,
everybody. So I had a friend, a very good friend, and his comment was, "What we need to do is change this entire cultural understanding of white and black and Hispanic in our nation." And I'm not being disrespectful, but I went, that that's great. How do we even begin to do that? What's our first
right,
step? Don't describe all the steps. What's our first step?
right,
And he shrugged his
right,
shoulders and said, I have no idea how to do that. I said, okay, but you just said we need to do that. It is a need. I need oxygen. I need water. I need sleep. I need basic nutrition. Uh, I need I need community. Those are real needs that I have. Without them, I'm going to die. I'm going to
right.
wither. But when you say we need to change these cultural factors that have taken hundreds of years,
Yep.
sure, we need to. We really should. And this is the conversation I had. We really should. We ought to do that. That is something we must do. And he looked at me with this kind of quizzical look and he goes, yeah, I agree. And I said, great. Need, should, ought, and must. The problem is we have nowhere to go in this wilderness. He goes, well, how can you say it any other way? Well, we're going to get to that in a few minutes. But that's one of the huge questions is, if you don't say need, should, ought, and must, what do you say?
Well, but it comes from a beginning point. You're not going to change how you say things if you don't understand where the beginning point is in the first place.
Right?
Of why are we using those particular words? Need, should, ought, and must.
Right. Why do we use those words? Why do
Be-
we?
Well, from the standpoint of it's like, well, somebody's got to make the decision. Someone has to set the line. Someone has to make the rules, which is
So, wait,
fascinating.
back up, back up, back up. So, this is about drawing a line. This is about setting rules. Is that what it is? Is that where need, should, ought, and must come from?
I I don't know. You Is
I'm
that what you
listening
think?
to you. No, you
Well,
got
no,
the
I
answers here. I've
well
got
no.
the complaint. I've got the complaint. I
You
brought it to
always have the
you.
complaint.
I know. So you can tell me what I should need, should, oughta, must do about an entire culture that has
No,
no idea how
no,
to think its way out of a
no,
bag.
no, because I'll spend the next 40 minutes listening to you tell me why I'm incorrect.
I can do that in about 2 minutes, but go ahead. I'll save 38 minutes. No, that's not a problem. It's interesting as you're thinking it through, you say somebody has to draw a line. Somebody needs to draw a line. You use need to describe need. You can't do
I
that.
did not.
Yes, you
didn't
did.
say need.
Play
I
the
didn't
tape
say
back.
need.
Somebody has to draw a line. You
I didn't say
said
need.
that.
I said has to. I didn't say
That's
need.
the same thing. It's just slang for need. Or
Someone
set the rules.
someone feels like they have to set the rules. Someone feels
Have
like they
to. Still have
to.
to. Same thing. Now, if you were to say someone feels like they have the right or the privilege, they own the right to set the rules. Now we're getting somewhere because we're not using need, should, ought, or must.
Excuse me.
Or just simplify the sentence. Someone sets the rules. Someone draws the line.
Right.
That's much more active than somebody needs to draw the line. What I'm saying is the phrasing of need, should, ought, and must and all the associated words is really wasteful thinking. What irritates me a great deal about what commonly is called curse words or swear words is that it allows the human mind simply not to think of real words that have power, that have impact, that have meaning. I was following three young girls. When I was a kid, like 250 years ago, young women in public society did not waste their breath on swear words. That was
Right.
what boys did to pretend
Right.
like they were grown up
Right.
and they were really tough. And then they
Right.
had the F word or the. So I'm following three girls down the sidewalk and all three of them are talking at the same time. They don't have telephones. They're not on their phones. They're in each other's presence. All three are talking simultaneously. And about every fifth or sixth word used as an adjective, an adverb, a main verb was F this, F that, it's F'ing this, it's I was so F on. I mean, and all three of them were doing it. None of them were listening to each other at all. I'm following behind. I'm not offended by this. I'm amused by it. Inside, I'm just laughing my head off. These girls are having a conversation. I followed them for maybe 3 minutes. And in 3 minutes, they must have used the F word 150 times between the three of them. And they said absolutely nothing in that, and they heard nothing at all.
Right.
But when I hear preachers, parents, teachers, politicians, people in positions of authority and responsibility, business owners, and the majority of sentences, newspaper articles where they're writing about important subject matter, need, should, oughta, must, main verb over and over and over and over and over. It just amazes me. So I was in an organization a number of years ago, and we were talking about setting the agenda for the future, setting an agenda. And one of the department heads that was my associate at my level in that organization had a 10-point list for the next year for his department. Bullet points. We need to, 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 we need all the way down. This is as I'm forming this idea that need, should, ought, and must are swear words. And so, like an idiot, I said, what if we don't do what we need to do? The room went silent. I said, you have 10 points of what we need to do. What happens if we don't do what we need to do? I am not kidding. I am not making this up. He said, we'll just add them to next year's list. So we don't really need to do them. If we don't
Right.
do them, we'll just do
We'll
them
just
next
add
year.
next year.
We'll add
Yeah.
them to next year's list. And I
There
thought
you
to myself,
go.
so then we got into a little bit deeper discussion and was like, well, then how do you say that? How do you that? And I said, well, let's take the first one. I'm not going to go into the details of that list. It was just so poorly done. But I said, so take the first item and say, in the current environment, here is what we are doing. This represents our action and our identity. So for next year, we will address this point of action, and that will change this aspect of our identity, and we will be able to build a new foundation. And
Right.
he said, could you do that for all 10 in his department? I said, no, it's just a
No.
suggestion. And he said, well, that's my list then. There we go. On to the next person.
Well, it's interesting because this whole, I mean, we have had this discussion many times, and we will have it many, many more times. Uh, I am sure because we keep poking each other about need, should, ought, and must. I think coming back again to the beginning of where this comes from to start with is particularly important. And I agree with you um, that we have moved from the ability to creatively communicate in a way that has substance and value to it, that has real impact. I think that's one of the things that's, to me, a simple illustration is when you listen to particular speakers and you have somebody who, uh, say, they communicate in their standard form as they communicate in 20 minutes, and versus somebody who wanders around for 55 minutes. You know, we see that a lot in churches. We see that a lot in sermons. And yet people say, well, how is it this 20-minute guy can get so much information in there versus the 55-minute guy who, I mean, it's good. There's lots of good stuff in there, but it just seems like it takes us forever to get wherever we need to go to. Well, because the 20-minute guy has spent an enormous amount of time, energy, and effort to make sure that communication is very, very succinct, very real, very relevant, very clear in what it is he's trying to communicate. There's no fuzzy edges to it. And so I think that from a simplistic, pragmatic way, it's much easier to use those words than it is to take the time to think through what is a better way to communicate what I'm trying to say. So, in the context, how would you do this from the standpoint of, when you're dealing with your kids and they need to clean up their room, okay?
Or
So
they need to eat their peas, or
they
right.
need to eat their Brussels
Pick
sprouts,
pick a
or they
night,
need to,
right.
right, okay? So how would you frame that in that context of, okay, well, how do I get them to do that? Because they ought to, they should. I mean, what's the backing up? What's the do you see that as the beginning? Where's the beginning point to begin to change that kind of communication
Well,
in your
in
mind? In your
podcast
mind,
2, and we're already referring back to previous podcasts. In podcast 2, we talked about the purpose of parenting.
that's right.
And the main purpose of parenting is to raise successful adults while they're children and youth in your home. So if you haven't happened to see podcast 2, go back and watch podcast 2.
Or
The
listen to it.
issue
Yeah.
is in having a clean room, is that a basic adult skill that you want your child to be able to develop. Now, some adults have never developed a skill at keeping their own possessions neat and clean. They're always kind of messy, things they can't find them. They get papers, they get mail, it's all piled up. They have no idea where anything is. And they lose opportunities, they miss bill payments. There's liquids get spilled on something and it's ruined. And so you end up wasting money because your keyboard got something on, whatever happens to be. The reality is that when a person develops the skill internally of being organized, it is because they have practiced that skill for a great deal of time and place value on the things that they own. When a human being is a young child, you can, as a parent, you can establish a demand, or you can teach them the value of the objects they own and why it is in their best interest to keep their room picked up or to eat nutritious food or whatever. Now, that said, there are kids who hate the taste of Brussels sprouts. Maybe it's an acquired adult taste, or maybe they'll never like Brussels sprouts. When they're an adult, they will be able to politely say, I don't care for any Brussels sprouts. When they're a child, if they are permitted a permission of refusing something that they don't want to eat, that's good. They get to be self-determining, and you don't trade off. Well, if you don't eat your Brussels sprouts, you don't get ice cream. When you're an adult, that's not the way life works. So you want to teach them. And it could be that Brussels sprouts create gas in their stomach, which as an adult you just deal with and you think nothing about it. But as a kid, that's extremely uncomfortable. So the 2 times they did eat their Brussels sprouts, they ended up with gas in their intestines. They really didn't like that feeling, or passing that gas in the middle of the night. And they realize, I don't like Brussels sprouts. So to say you need to eat your Brussels sprouts, you have no real need to eat Brussels sprouts. What you want to do is learn how to make decisions for your own life that others respect. Ultimately, that actually is a need, to be respected. But you don't get there by saying I need to be respected. You get there by respecting others and by being respected yourself.
Right.
So the challenge then is, when you say you need to clean your room before you go out with your friends, that's not a need. If you say, I am expecting you to clean your room, one of the requirements of the privilege of going out tonight is that the things you own are taken care of by you. When you do that in your room, then I will know that you also have basic respect for others and their property when you go out. This is a very important adult lesson. And I had to learn it, and I would like you to learn it as well. Okay, good to go. So you didn't use need, should, ought, or must at all. You described the end product and the process by which you want to get there. You say that's too many words. It's not too many words if you only have to do it once or twice.
Right.
But if you have to yell at your kid day after day after day, I told you need to clean up your room. You really ought to clean up your room. You have to clean up your room. On and on and on. You waste 10 million words when you could have taught a child this is something you own. If you don't value it, that tells me that it would be good for you to be able to give those things away. If you have too many toys to take care of, and there are children that have too many toys, the ones that you have left out in the living room, I'm going to put in a box and take down to Goodwill or to the local children's giveaway thing. And the toys that you don't want and that you don't respect or care for, you're just overwhelmed. Your capacity to care for your toys is too much. So I understand that. And what I want to do is take the excess toys, not your favorite ones, but your excess toys, and get rid of them. Your excess clothing, your excess technology. That's good. If you don't want to take care of it, or you don't have the capacity, I'm not going to say you need to, you should, you're ought, on and on and on. I'm going to say you just don't. I recognize that. So let's scale down to the point that your capacity also meets your possessions. And I'm good with that. And I've done that with my children when they were young. And one of my children, which happened to be my daughter, and I won't tell you what her name is, but I only have one, um, is her response was, "Oh, that would be great." What? That'd be great. I don't need all those. I don't need all those toys. Okay. So we gave a whole bunch of them away, and she was happy because she just had way too much stuff, and it was stressful to her to have so many possessions that she was simply not able, in her capacity at that age, to manage to care for all that. I didn't understand. I mean, we kept saying, let's just give her more stuff. Christmas is coming, birthday's coming, this coming. It's summertime. Let's buy more stuff. And it was beyond her capacity to manage. By the time we said, let's give some of it away, it was like, wow, what a relief. So it was not a punishment. It was a good thing. I
Right,
like that.
right. No, that is a good thing. Well, I think in what you're doing is you're teaching life lessons, and that's the issue here.
That's really
Instead
it,
of
right.
giving directives, because that's really what needs, should, ought, and must are directives. They're
Right.
not about they're not about facilitating learning. They're not about life lessons. They're not about character development. They are about directives. And it's much easier to give a directive than it is to actually come alongside someone and to participate in the learning process with them. And I think when we find, again, back to that, and we'll come back to this and do another one on parenting at some point, because I think you and I have a few other things we'd like to share about what that looks like in helping them understand their emotions and those kinds of dynamics in their lives. But I think that it's the same kind of thing that happens so much in our lives when we get. I mean, our society, which is struggling at this current time, because we're all being asked to slow down. We're all being asked to stay home. We're all being asked to stay in relationship with primary people every day. So all of the busyness of life, much of the busyness of life is is really kind of in limbo. And so consequently we don't even know what to do with that. And so what I find is that I'm reading a particular book now about the elimination of hurry, which is kind of funny for me. But it coincides with that same concept of where we are so we're so busy in life that we're not helping our children, our and people around us learn character, to facilitate character, to spend the time with them uh, to really understand what it's like. So, for example, which I find to be, and I know that you did this with your kids too, but uh, so many people say kids don't know how to work, and I said, well, I mean, young men and women don't know how to work, even into the 30s and 40s. I said, well, let me ask you a simple question. When you're at home, how did you participate at home? Did you did your mom take care of everything? Did dad take care of everything? Did you hire somebody to come in and clean? Did all those things just magically take place for you?
Right.
And most of them would say, well, yeah. I said, well, so you never had to do chores? Well, no, I don't know how to turn a wash machine on. You never made a meal? Well, no. You never went shopping? Well, no, I never did that. Somebody else always did that. There was always food on the table, or we get takeout, or we'd go to wherever. So, well, the problem with that is that not only you say, well, those are all functional things. They're very functional, but what people are missing is the character and the relationship that's being developed when you're participating together in those things. They don't see that part. And so then what happens? Well, it's much easier then to go to the directive nature of things of you really need to do this. You need to do this. You need to make sure you've never had to develop character and you've never spent that time to build that relationship. so that it makes any sense. Because now you're giving edicts, you're giving directives. You're not, you're, which is really in leadership development, you know that as well as I do. That's the weakest form of leadership. Is when you end up being in a place where you are the guy at the top and you're giving directives. That is the weakest form of leadership.
So why
Strong
is it weak? Why is it weak? You say in the pyramid of power,
right, right,
and at the apex, making it to the very top of the
right,
pile, you're saying that's weak leadership instead of strong leadership. Why is that
right.
weak leadership?
Because it's only vested in you. It's not vested in the other people around you. So your relationship to be able to live in relationship with other people, so that you have multiplicity of strength that's coming out of that in the people around you, there is a lack of relationships. So all of those issues of risk and trust and honor and respect and all those things tend to become very, very thin when all you're doing is giving directives, because you're not in relationship with people around you. That is the strongest bond of being able to get fellowship as a
Sure.
leader.
So you're running a company. Let's take it out of the family,
Sure,
and
go
then
for it.
say, let's talk about corporation or classroom management or educational system or something of that nature. How do we lead an organization of people, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, if we don't have that power from the top to set policy, to make demands, to build expectations? Because bottom line, literally the bottom line is, how profitable is this company? And
Right,
our shareholders care. They don't care if we're touchy feely, everybody's
right,
singing kumbaya,
right.
holding hands in a COVID separated manner. Um, so you have the company with good relationships. You don't get anything done. You're not profitable. Nobody jumps when you say go. The challenge is, how can a corporation actually run in
Right.
that fashion? So you froze. What happened?
So, I doubt if we froze. Anyway, I would say I'd come back and say your definition of good relationship is not a good not what I would consider a good relationship. If people don't respond in kind and respect, and so yes, you have to be the guy or the gal, the lady or the man who sets policy, but it's how you set policy. If it is set in this arbitrary uh, kind of edict handed down off the mountain kind of thing, then you don't have buy-in with your people around you. You don't have that respect that says, "Look, I'm going to listen to them." So it's the difference between sitting around a table with people and one guy at the end saying, "This is what we're going to do, and this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to do it." Well, the guy at the end of the table sitting there and say, "Okay, here are the four different ideas that have been tossed out here that we need to now let's shred them and come up with the one that's going to work. And maybe it's none of the four, but someone's going to have to make the decision in the end. That's right. But everybody sitting around that table has already agreed that when the decision is made, regardless of whose idea it is, we're in this together and we're going to all put our shoulder to the wheel. We're all going to be behind it 110%, even if I don't think it's the very best. But I have participated because now I'm in relationship, but I have participated in bringing about that product. And I've done my job, my due diligence as a professional of bringing my professional opinion to the table. But my professional opinion is valued. And I know it's valued by the guy at the end of the table because I have a relationship with him and the way he treats me and what's gone on. So I'm going to do that same thing. You say a company of hundreds of thousands of people, okay? So he's doing that with me. He models that with me, or she models that with me. I mean, some of the some of the best bosses I've ever had have been wonderful women that I just really have enjoyed working with and working for. But there's the key. I have always enjoyed working with them as well as for them. So it's a combination that says, I come together versus someone saying, you need to do this, you ought to do this, you must do this. When that decision is made corporately, whether it's by a small group, a larger group of, I think you can't get very big, but then you take those into your own areas and you do the same thing. You facilitate that same kind of mindset because it's permeated from the top all the way through. And it's not just an isolated incident that says, this is how kind of they do it, but the rest of us, you know, we have all these other mid-level management people that are tyrants that are just, cracking the whip to get the stuff done. The key to vision casting, in my mind, in any organization that tells me a ton about the organization is that I can go to the lowest vested person in the organization and I can ask them what their role is and how they fit into the vision of that organization. And they can tell me. They can tell me what the vision is, and they can tell me what their place is in that organization in a very valued sense, not just a functionary sense. So however you describe that, maybe the lowest vested person you wouldn't even think about is the guy who works swing shift custodial. Does he know what his vested role is in the whole organization in what he's doing? Does he understand that or she understand that? And can they articulate that? But more than that, are they actually living that out in their swing shift on a daily basis?
Right. The problem with where we are right now in the conversation is we have wandered so far off the path when we started talking about what you're describing is learning organizational theory and
Sure.
how an organization is grown from the ground up and how it functions. That's fine. The problem that I see, or the opportunity in this conversation, is to come back to a simple process of thinking through how do we say, as leaders, as parents, as influencers, how do we say an idea that has merit, it has value,
Right.
it is something of
Right.
significance without phrasing it as need, should, ought, and
Right.
must.
Right.
that's
Well,
that's where we started on this path, and we're now
right.
dangling off a tree, hanging over the abyss of organizational theory. And what happens if your organization, you have this beautiful idea of an organization that works on relationships, and you work in a crappy company where your boss just screamed at you and threatened to fire you because you didn't do what you need, should, ought, and must do. The question then is, how do you get that out of your system and come back to what we're talking about in terms of gripping reality?
Right.
How do you say those directives or those policies in a different fashion altogether? What language can you use? So let me give you an example, illustration.
Okay.
This is
Here we go.
only an illustration. It's only an
Of
anecdote.
course. Yeah, that's right. Because we weren't doing anything that was any value up to this point.
No, it had
Excuse me.
value. It's another podcast. It's something else. We're going to get to that eventually. It's extremely important, just not right now.
It's the issue of being directive versus that of being facilitating and learning and character. So
Yeah,
give
I'm
your
taking
ideas.
over
Here we
this
go.
conversation. I
I know you
understand that.
are, and I
You want to
said
facilitate, you want to herd all the cats, and you're
we
actually
want to make
herding
everybody
turtles.
happy.
Come on, you cannot herd turtles. Cats at least go somewhere. You can put some food down, they're going to come. Turtles, what do? You can't do anything with turtles whatsoever. What I'm saying is, I'm going to commandeer this back to the original conversation, which is it is cursing to use need, should, ought, and must, and lazy brain. It's lazy brain to use need, should, ought, and must. So we have a work project in Honduras. Honduras is the #1 murder country in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, and it's dangerous. When people have said to me, why in the world do you work in Honduras? I mean, it is threateningly dangerous. And my response to that is America threateningly dangerous? And people say, well, no, it's great here in America. Say, okay, let's go to downtown Chicago at 2 in the morning. Let's go to Washington, D.C. Let's go to New York City. Let's go to Rochester, New York. 2 in the morning, certain neighborhoods. Is that wise for you to be walking around with $50 in your pocket? The answer is probably not, because it's dangerous. The reality is it's dangerous everywhere in the world if you don't act with wisdom and understanding. So I've taken 55 different people from the United States with me down to Honduras, over 30 different teams, to experience Latin America and to work on our project down there. I've explained to the teams when we went prior in our advanced training, I want you to understand, I have been here many times. I understand this culture. I understand the language. I have been on these streets. I have seen what happens. I know these people to a very significant degree. Not absolutely, but I know. I have a very good understanding. When we are walking down the street, going to the Mercado or going to a ferreteria or some place where we are going to get some supplies, and I see a situation developing that has the potential of danger, with my experience and my knowledge, I am going to say to you, come with me now. Not you need to come with me. You should come with me. I'm not going to lay, I'm going to say, come with me now. When I say stop or turn left, it is for your safety, because I understand what's happening. If you grant me that role, I will guarantee you will be safe in this country. If you ignore that, you and I both can enter into danger that we do not want to face. Is that agreeable to you? Only once out of all the people that applied for a team did I have to leave somebody home in the United States because he would not agree with that. He would not agree with that. And I said, fine, that's that, but it's too great of a risk for me to take you to that country if you do not give me that authority. So, how do you say things? I will say, you will do this. The most powerful command in both Hebrew and Greek in the Bible is the future indicative. You will do this. When a general says to his captain, you will do this, and there's no question about it. He sets the policy. That's the way it's going to happen. He doesn't say you need to do this or you really should do this. He says you will do this. And that's amazingly powerful. Totally by the side. The 10 commandments are not need, should, ought, or must. They're not. They're future indicatives. You're a people coming out of Egypt. You have seen Egyptians worship. You have dressed Egyptian dress. You have worked on Egyptian projects. You have no idea who I am. You have no idea how to live in the promised land. When you enter the promised land, you will not have any other gods than me. You will keep a Sabbath day. You will honor your father and your mother. You will not murder. They are future indicatives because of God's authority, not because of his power, but because of his authority to
Right,
establish the
right,
boundaries,
right,
because they were right to do. And I
right.
think the real key is for a parent or a business owner or a teacher in a classroom, do you know what is right and why that is right within the environment under your authority? You can describe that as you will, you can, you you are doing this, and not phrase it as need, should, ought, and must, which become demands, slap in the face. I've got to make you feel guilty or ashamed. This is a power fight. And if you remove the power fight and bring in an authority structure, what you're working towards is what is right to do because it's right, not what you have to do because I said so. That to me is where we are. And the whole matter of learning organizational theory, which was brilliant on your part, we'll get to that later, just not now.
I hear what you are saying in that context. So put that in the context of Johnny um, not wanting to clean his room. Do you say to Johnny, you will clean your room
You
before you
can,
go?
or you want to clean your room, or if you don't clean your room, I I'm fine with that. When you need your clothes clean and they don't smell like dirty feet because you walked over your clothing, then do not come to me and ask me to make sure your clothing is clean or you need something new, because my answer will be no.
So did you just
Uh,
use need twice there?
I didn't use need at all.
You used need twice. You said if you need your clothes cleaned or you need something new.
You want your clothes. I said want. Play the
You
tape
said
back over again.
you said
If you
need.
want your clothes
You
clean,
said need. I so love this. I just so love this.
so the kid
When I
has
get you,
clothing all over their floor. Go
when
out
you
with your
what?
friends. No, no, no. Go out with your friends. I'm perfectly good with that. What I'm going to do is go into your room with a very large garbage bag, and every item that's on the floor, not where it belongs, is going in the garbage bag. It will sit beside the garbage cans until garbage day. If it's still there, then it goes out in the garbage.
Yeah.
Underwear,
No.
socks, teddy bears, technology, I don't care what it is, but definitely go out with your friends, walk out of this house at 5:30 to go do something fun with your friends, which is great, and I will be in your room at 5:35 with a garbage bag. Everything on the floor is going in a garbage bag. I didn't use need, should, ought, or must.
No, you
And a
didn't.
child
But
says, "What if I get everything picked up?" I'm good with that too. It's yours. It belongs to you. Learning how to take care of your own possessions is an extremely important skill. But should you choose to go with your friends instead of taking care of your responsibilities, I'm good with that. I will make sure the floor is visible by the time you get home.
yes.
End of
Uh,
fight.
in the fight. And the issue then, if I may, since we're going to get into the weeds on this just a little bit, has to do with back to the authority aspect of what you're talking about.
Sure.
Do you know what your authority really is in that relationship? And if you are such that your son or daughter is sitting there and saying to themselves, "Oh, I've heard this before. This is never, that'll never happen."
Sure. And you're not
Um,
going to do anything about it.
you're not gonna do anything about it. It's the same thing of when, why is it my kids won't get ready to go to bed when I, ask them to go to bed, and they ignore me until I get to a point of where, I'm flaming hot and I jump up off the couch and I go stomping upstairs and then they all scatter. Yeah, it's that same thing of
Well,
developing
right,
your
because you actually
relationships.
had an action step and they have been trained not to respond
Right,
until you act. And when you only act in anger, then that's going to be the composition of your family. You made the
right,
comment, we're going to wander in the weeds on this. When you're on a path, that's when you've been doing this by habit over and over and over, and you have a good, clear path. I understand that. There are small weeds, little ones, and there are times in which the weeds have grown huge and they're thistles and they're all entangled and there's thorns in there, and the environment beside your path and your family or your business or your community or your neighborhood or whatever it is has way overgrown. The reality is trying to corral in need, should, ought, and must. You're watching this podcast. I'm talking to you there. If you go immediately and try to slap this in over a weed infested pathway, it's going to
yep,
be incredibly challenging. So you're going to
yep,
cut things down. Just listen to your own language to
right,
begin with. How many times do you say need, should, ought, or must as the main verb of your sentence?
correct.
Listen to yourself and then say, why did I say it that way? How can I say that differently? You have to start somewhere. You can't change everything all at once, but you can change something. So instead
Right.
of having the sentences that roll out of your mouth over and over, or the explosion of anger, corral it back a little. Find one thing you can do, not what you
Right.
need to do, what you can do, and do that. That
Right.
becomes a
And I think
strategy for actually getting somewhere.
right. And at the same time, I would also say I do this. Um, play a little bit of a game. If you listen to a number of podcasts, or if you listen to lectures or sermons or whatever, is how many times you hear people use those phrases
Right.
in those lecture sermons podcasts when they say should, ought, or must. And what I try to do is when I hear them say that is think in my mind, how could have that been said differently, and then rephrase that so it's said differently in my mind. And it's a very simple practice, but it's really helpful to do that because you then start thinking differently. You start thinking much broader in the context of what you could really communicate when you're trying to get those kinds of concepts and ideas across to people. So yeah,
Sure.
I mean
So if you
those are
happen to be
good.
a person that goes to church, if you listen to the content of the sermon from your pastor and the action points in the conclusion of the sermon are four statements of what you need, should, ought, or must do, do not leap out of your pew and go, ha, ha, should, ought, or must. I heard it. You just swore at us. Do not do that. It's for
Or
your learning first. Once you've eradicated need, should, ought, or must from your own vocabulary, then you can go to your pastor and speak to him or her privately and say, did you know how often you use the word need, should, ought, or must? Do not follow that up with, you really need to cut that out. Don't say it that way.
and I
But
would say that
definitely don't blast your pastor because they did refer them to hear podcast number 5, listen carefully and support them because that's right to do.
and don't
If your
go into
pastor
your
comes after
net.
me because I taught you how to go blast them to pieces, I'm in serious trouble here. So you need not to do that. I need you not. Wait a minute. How do I say that?
No, 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 no. You will
Don't.
not do that.
You will not do that. There we go.
And please do not go into your next meeting with your boss and all of your colleagues that are sitting around the table. And when he starts saying you need to do this and need to do that, you jump up and go, see, I told you. You might find yourself
Bear in mind, your
unemployment that day.
boss has not heard this podcast. So if you come out with uh, guns blazing, hand grenades blasting off everywhere, barbed wire being shredded, you cannot do that effectively until everyone in the entire world has stopped using need, should, ought, or must.
They should honor
That's
us.
our goal with
That's
this,
right.
folks, by the way. And you have become agents of clean thinking, not filthy thinking, using the curse words of need,
That's
should,
right.
ought, and must. I feel my mouth tingling every time I say that. But to be able to eliminate need, should, ought, and must from the human language in every language, dialect, and tongue on the face of the earth. I know that's
Well,
a large challenge, but we can do it.
I think we've sufficiently beat people to death with this
Okay, we're
today.
done.
So, yeah, so gripping reality, you really can live without cursing
You can.
using need, should, ought, and must.
No, don't use those words. If you
Right.
have a response to this, or you want to have us deal with a subject that you don't really know how to bring up to your mother-in-law, but she'll watch this podcast, send us a note to Mike@grippingreality.com. And you can spell Mike either way, Mike or Myke. We'll get it. We talk to each other. We'll share information. We will not put your name into the podcast, but this is definitely something you want us to deal with because your mother-in-law wants to be able to hear an option for something that is just too tough for you to bring up. We'll bring it up and make sure that your mother-in-law has what she desires.
Yes. So,
Not what she needs to hear.
well, okay. I think we need to
Now,
call it
when we're
quits
done with
now.
this, we're going to sign off. But when this gets posted, I'm going back to listen to find out if I said need 11 minutes ago. And
You
if
did.
I
You
did,
did.
shoot me a note and blow me to pieces. But if I didn't, blast Mike.
All right. I just had this thought that we might want to think about doing one more before Thanksgiving and talk about um, how do we get through Thanksgiving this year
Let's back it up, not
emotionally.
deal with the holiday because some people are going to listen to this podcast not during Thanksgiving week. Let's talk about gratitude when there's nothing to be thankful for.
We got that. All right. Good enough. Till next
That'd be a
time.
good one.
Grip,
Yeah.
grip in reality.
Thanks.
All right. Bye bye. Trying to turn us off.
That's a scary face.